You're here, the source for the most abundant footage collected of extraterrestrial evidence. This is VSET, In Focus UFOs. My experiences began as a young man when my uncle first introduced me to an encounter that has continued to follow me throughout the travels of my life. You know, in the past, I had been the target of ridicule and criticism because of my claims. So I've been reluctant to share my catalog, but I have decided the time is now, and this channel, VSET In Focus UFOs, is the place. Today is September 17th, 2015, and a new report supports the theory that two black holes in a galaxy 3.5 billion light years away are headed for a cosmic collision of unimaginable scale. This isn't conjecture. This is what our life is today. I have now decided to utilize this channel to share my experiences. I have footage of airborne craft that I have recorded across the continent of North and South America and throughout the South Pacific. I have had direct contact with alien life, and I know from shared experiences that these encounters are not unique. So welcome to the source, where you will find the most information current today regarding our cosmos and the world we live in. And I will be cataloging all of my archival footage and analyzing it and describing to you in detail how it was captured and what I experienced. Welcome to VSET, In Focus UFOs. They call me Ed. These images that you're seeing now were shot on a farm I was living in at the time in western Colorado. This was back in about 1993, just outside of Leadville. When you look at the size and scale of the ship, and you see this image, you'll notice what looks like columns. And if you look to the right portal, you'll see an image of who I came to know as Voss. Notice how large the area is in the interior through the shot. You also see that I'm changing from black and white to color and back again. The low light conditions and my experimentation with the camera, I wanted to get the contrast. And as I locked in on that portal and the image of the extraterrestrial, I knew that I had captured something really special. I'd seen the light from this craft about 4 days before I took these images. So I went up to Grand Junction and bought a brand new Canon A1 digital camera. I think at the time it was one of the first new digital cameras on the market. I dug these images up because I remember shooting them. Some things have happened that made me think about sharing these images specifically with SETV. First, check out the color and shape of the craft. Just look at that. Look at the craft and look at the light emanating from it. I know that a big part of reporting and sharing information on UFOs, it's got a lot to do with the emotional side of it. I've had more than 3 decades worth of encounters with extraterrestrials that I've captured. But on an emotional level, this experience may be by far the most intimidating that I've ever had. Maybe it was because I was using the new digital camera and not having to worry about being too conservative with what I was shooting. When you shoot film, those SLR 35mm cameras, you pay so much per roll and to develop. That's how I learned to shoot, and this was new to me. The other reason why I dug these images up, I remembered, them because I just heard the other day in the news that President Bush, I don't think he was still the president at the time, he might have just gotten out of office, Bush Sr. He was just asked the other day, and I just heard this on the news, about the presence of UFOs. He was asked, are there UFOs, President Bush? He was asked that at a press conference. And he said something to the effect of, people in this country are not ready for the truth. And that reminded me about these images when I took them and how I felt at the time, that I wasn't going to share them, and I needed to share them and get them out there. But there's always been so much negativity surrounding this information. And I remember my uncle telling me about that issue. My uncle was a combat pilot, and he had seen UFO craft while he was engaged, and he told me that many other combat pilots had seen the same thing, but none of them ever spoke of it. It was like it was, a matter of not cracking up. My uncle believed that extraterrestrials revealed themselves during air combat situations and then would continue to reveal themselves to the pilots and crews that flew on these missions if they were receptive. Well, I know this firsthand to be true because it was my uncle that first introduced me to an encounter when I was still a young man. Now, it wasn't as though he could summon them, but he was in tune and he was aware. My uncle also taught me that communication with extraterrestrials on these craft had happened with him and other servicemen, and that if I was receptive, that I could expect that it may happen to me again and again. When Bush was elected president, my uncle had already died. But I remember him telling me when he was still alive that Bush wasn't chosen as director of the CIA for what he didn't know, and that one day in my life the truth would be revealed to all. This is why I'm coming forward with these images and stories. This is why I dug up this footage. I think maybe it's for the same reason that, Bush gave the answer he did at that press conference the other day. We as a country may not be ready for the truth, but eventually it all comes out. And it certainly seems to me, with the way technology has evolved over the last 10 to 20 years and what has become of our culture, it's kind of funny, all those supposed smart people, especially the young people, walking around like they're detached, absorbed in their own world of information. It's funny. But by the time these images and the archive of evidence that I'm sharing here on In Focus UFOs becomes accepted, where do you think we'll be in 30 years from now? There's water on Mars and new planets being discovered by the week that have the potential to support life. I'll still be here. This week I am sharing some more archival footage that I shot. This time it's from Florida's West Coast. It was taken about a decade ago. I'd spent a large portion of my youth in this area and moved back here later in life for a few years to be closer to extended family. But the reason I retrieved this footage has something to do with what has happened in the past week, as well as some of the responses that I read regarding my last posting. Specifically, I received a question from a viewer that asked me about my experiences, based on that footage that I last posted. He wanted to know details about my encounter with the alien being that I have come to know as Voss. He wanted to know details about his physical attributes. Well, before I get into that, I know that the ability to get a quick answer that will sum up the question is simply not going to happen. What is happening is more and more evidence is now being presented in the mainstream media on a weekly, if not daily basis. All of these facts further justify the timing of the launch of this channel and my decision to finally share my archival footage with the world. Having said that, I still have some reluctance to simply state that this is what happened and that this is the way it is. For the thought that struck me about this report from the Kepler telescope on this star whose name and identification number I can't even tell you, is that after you finish watching this new footage that I've posted here, I ask that you go outside and look up into your own night sky, wherever you are. If you're in a city or out in the suburbs, or I guess ideally out in a remote place, hundreds of miles from the nearest town with lights. Look up, and if it's a clear night without cloud cover and without a near or a full moon, you'll see the immensity. The point is that this Kepler recording is the first of many to come. And the more that come, the more we as people will be accepting to this news and the reality to the world we live in and the universe that we live in. My story is not the only story, nor it is the one and only true story. My experiences with extraterrestrials and the images that I've recorded are not the end all. Just in my catalog alone, I have great diversity. So whether it's a Kepler recording of an image of a star and a structure reportedly built at around the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, or if it is the latest sighting from your neighbor down the street, get used to it, for this is life as we now know it. As to what my experience specifically is with Voss, well, first off, there was more than one. There were more than a dozen. And beyond Voss, there were others. I will continue to post the images and footage that I have here. And I will be submitting these images with my recollections of what it was like when they were recorded and what it was that motivated me to select these images. As to giving exact, specific details on what the experience was like and what I was feeling at the time, please remember, I'm willing to do this. But more importantly, you need to realize that these experiences are my own. These are not the experiences of anyone else but my own. And I state that because my experiences do not define what the truth is. My experiences define what the truth is for me. So my objective here at VSET In Focus UFOs is to post this archival footage that I have. I have footage shot in South America, the Pacific Northwest, in New England, in the Plains States, in Australia, New Zealand, and in other parts around the world. I will continue to post and share this information here. I believe the time is now, and I'll still be here. I don't know if you're still here with me. Here I am. Here you can see this. I don't know if it's still rolling, but there's a bright light. I'm being drawn in. I can feel this energy drawing me in. It's like I'm being invited here. Here I go. You're here, In Focus UFOs. I have here the footage you've been waiting for. First, this footage that I shot a decade ago in the forest above our home in Colorado. It was early afternoon, not long after lunch, and I was working in the field mending a fence. And I first sensed it, but then I saw, looking up toward the sun, a group of craft flying in a tight formation at an extremely high speed. I thought that maybe it was one large craft, but then they broke formation and headed west. But one made its way north, and instead of climbing, it descended toward the horizon, just over the tree line. Then, with the sun almost behind it, I clearly watched it. It first stopped, and then it stayed there, stationary. And then, with the sun just behind it, it descended straight down into the forest line. So I immediately got into my truck and went back to the house, and I grabbed my rifle and my camera, and I set out on foot. At the time, I was shooting a Sony TVR 900, and that I bought used. I had had it for a couple of years. So I set off to where I thought the craft had come down, and I just, used dead reckoning. And I must have hiked for about 2 hours. And I was probably at an elevation of that point of about 8,000 feet. The higher I got, the denser the forest was. But I just, kept getting close to the point of thinking, I'm there, I'm almost there. I was kind of like a kid. I just kept going. I knew that it was there. And, this is when I just started to roll the tape. Well, on my way up, I was less than an hour in. I started to see, all kinds of game running. It's not unusual up in the hills to see deer or other game, but it is not normal to see, a variety of different game on a given day. So there was fox, opossum, skunk, um, you know, just a variety of game where a lot of activity. And at one point, I could hear through the trees less than a quarter of a mile away, I glimpsed a black bear hightailing it at full speed through the trees. So none of these animals were running from me. They were already on the move. So by the time I came up to the ship, when I started to roll tape here, I was nearly out of breath from the hike and the increased altitude. So I turned my camera on, and again, I felt totally unthreatened, as I had in many in my previous encounters. And the ship itself, it was not menacing, as you could see. I felt welcomed. It was as though, the 2-hour hike had just been a 5-minute walk, and I just kept walking. But I kept the camera at chest level, away from my eye as I got closer, because I was expected to be greeted. And it had been more than a few years since my last direct encounter, and I was looking forward to this opportunity to have this encounter again. And I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize the experience. So as you could see, as I'm approaching, the light from the ship turned a flat white, and it just didn't envelope me, and it enveloped the entire area. And at that point, the camera stopped functioning. And that was the beginning of my encounter aboard the craft, in which I was invited aboard, and I ended up being reunited with my contact Voss. I have additional footage that I will be putting up here, taken with the permission of Voss, aboard a number of different ships. I've got footage of distant planets and views looking back at Earth, as well as the interior of the craft and their inhabitants. I will continue to post my footage and wait for the news of the day to verify these experiences that I know that I am not alone in.